Hello friends, welcome to this Python tutorial course. In this part, we will be covering some basic data types like integer, complex number, float, and boolean. And in subsequent parts, we will focus on other data types like string, list, tuples, dictionary, and sets. So let's get started. Python, we have some basic data types like integer, which can store positive, negative integer value. Float, we can store positive, negative floating point numbers. String, this can store empty or non-empty strings with wildcard characters as well. This will store simply complex number and boolean for true and false values. Let's say if you want to declare an integer variable, you can simply say the variable name equal to the value which you want to assign. Here I have created a variable with name var int and assigned value 10 to it. When I declare this statement at the runtime, object 10 will be create object with value 10 will be created into memory, and var int variable will simply point to that object. Let's say now I want to print the value of var int. How we can do that? You can simply say print this %d is for integer, and then you can specify a variable name. So here %d and your variable name. This will print value of your variable. And if you want to check the type of your variable, what is the type? Because here you have explicitly not specified any type. In case of Python, you need not have to specify the type explicitly the way you do it in other languages like C, C++, or Java. In C, C++, you can simply say int and then variable name equal to the value. This is not required in Python because Python is a dynamically typed language and the type checking happens during execution. It doesn't happen before execution. Also, the Python is an interpreted language. It executes each and every statement line by line, and thus the type checking is done on the fly at the runtime. Hence, it is called as dynamically typed language. That's why we are not specifying the type explicitly. When we assign value 10 to var int, the int will be treated as an integer. If we assign any float value to this variable, this will be treated as a float value. So now just see it print its value. So here you can see my var int, its value is 10, and for type it is printing it as a class. Okay. Notice the difference. It has not printed only the type integer or float or double. It is printing it as a class because in Python, everything is an object. Even if you declare any integer, float, character, everything will be treated as an object. If you have seen my first video on the object referencing, there I have mentioned how Python treats everything as an object and how the object referencing works. Okay. That's why when you print the type, it is printing it as a class. That means var int is a pointer to a type of basically an object of type integer. Okay. Similarly, we have these other data types like float, string, complex. If we want to print similar things for those data type, the method is same. Let's say I want to declare a float variable. I can simply say float and assign some float value to it. When we assign a float value to it, and even if we have not specified any type, this variable will be treated as a float because this is evaluated at the runtime, and because this value is float, this object type will be a float. Similarly, for this string, here for this string variable, I have assigned a value as a text char. Then the string will be printed and the type will be printed as a string. In Python, the string class is referred as a str class. The value will be printed as str. For Boolean, the similar thing. Value will be printed and then the class will be. Let's just execute this. Okay. Here you can see, right? Okay. For float, why we are seeing these two values? Notice the difference here. For float, I have assigned value as 10.5. If we simply specify %f, it will print some the floating point numbers, the decimal numbers after it. But if you want some limited decimal points, then you can simply specify how many digits you want after the decimal point. Okay, I want 2 point. That's why I have given it as a 0.2f, and because of this it had just printed 10.50 and not the digits after that. So for any use case, if you want to restrict the numbers after decimal point, you can simply use uh, this notion. Okay, here you can see for string the class is str, for boolean the class is bool, for float the class is float, for integer the class is integer. Now let's just talk about the memory representation of these variables. So for example, in this case, right, I have declared a variable var1 with value 10. Then I have declared variable 2 with again with value 10, and variable 3 is assigned with variable 2. And now I want to print the object ID for this variable 1. And how we can do that? In Python, we have a utility called ID. This return the identity of an object. So you can use this ID to print the ID for a specific object. And let's just run this program. Okay, it has printed the ID for var1. Now just pause this video for a second and answer in the comment section that what do you think the ID for var2 will be? Will it create a new object for var2, or var2 will point to the same object, or how it will behave? Okay. Now just try to print the ID for var2, and because var2 is assigned with the same value, the ID for the object will still remain same. This behavior I have explained in my first video how this object referencing works. So you can go and check that video for more details. But in brief, if memory contains the object with similar value, no new object will be created. Instead, only references will be added to that object. Okay, so here object 10 was already exists, hence for var2, no new object will be created, and var2 will simply point to the same object. Similarly, for var3, it is pointing to the var2, and var2 is ultimately pointing to the same object, which is var3. Hence, in this case, for all these four cases, for var1, var2, var3, and ultimately for actual value of 10, the ID will be same. Okay. And this behavior will be same for all data types, irrespective of the complex data types as well. So this will be same for integer, float, boolean, as well as for string, list, tuple. This behavior will be same. Now let's talk about some max limits on these data types. For example, integer, what is the max limit? Float, what is the max limit? So in other languages, we have seen that for integer, float, we need at least 4 or 8 bytes to store the value. It depends on the platform. If it is 32 bits, 64 bits, the value might differ, but it's around the same values like 4 bytes or 8 bytes. So here in Python, what is the size for integers or float, or for that matter for the strings? Okay. So as such, theoretically, there is no a maximum limit on the size for integers. Let's just see one example for better understanding. Let's say I have declared a variable x with some extensively large number. I don't know what this value is, but very big number. Okay. In other languages like Java or C or any other stuff, this will not work, and it will flow with some overflow exception because this is not in a range with some integer or float. But in Python, how this will work? Let's say I am doing now x is equal to and adding some value to it, and will print the summation for the x. Okay. So in other languages, this will not work, but in Python, this is working. And what's the reason for it? Because Python can actually handle the arbitrarily large integers in computations, and this is handled at the software level. If any integer or float number is too big to fit into 64 bits or 32 bits, it is handled at the software level instead of hardware level. That's why there is no max limit imposed on the numbers, specifically for the computation. Is this true for the strings as well? So yes, it is true for the strings as well. So what is the max limit for the strings? So for max limit for the strings can be depend on the memory available on your system. For example, let's say on some specific system, you have memory available, let's say 256 GB. In that case, you can create a string up to 255 GB. Okay, so that's the limit we have on the screen. So theoretically saying there is no max limit imposed on the integers or string in the Python. So that's it for the basic data types. In next session, we will focus on the data structure like list, tuple, set, dictionary, and we will also see some interview questions around that. Thanks everyone. Please do subscribe to TechSharp channel for more such interesting videos.